Stop doing homesteading the hard way, because right now, real money and real time are getting wasted daily. More money, more time, and more energy than necessary are being spent, and the fixes are embarrassingly simple. These are hacks that cut a feed bill in half, tricks that turn one afternoon into a year of free fertilizer. Layout changes so obvious that discovering them late feels genuinely frustrating in hindsight. None of these are cute Pinterest ideas. These are 15 field-tested hacks experienced farmers wish they'd known sooner. Some of these trace back centuries, others got discovered by accident after years of doing things the expensive way. By the end of this video, a complete toolkit of shortcuts emerges that saves hundreds of dollars every year. Daily chore time gets slashed, and a property starts working like a system instead of an endless to-do list. Here is what nobody mentions when someone first starts homesteading with genuine enthusiasm and zero real guidance. The first 3 to 5 years typically get spent relearning lessons earlier generations already fully understood. Every single one of those lessons tends to cost real money along the way, while learning happens. Buying the wrong feed alone can quietly cost $400 a year without anyone noticing the drain. Setting up a co-op in the wrong spot means hauling water 200 feet every single January morning. Planting a garden without considering runoff means half the topsoil washing into the driveway by spring. The average small homesteader spends over $2,500 a year on inputs that could largely disappear. Feed alone eats up 60 to 70% of most livestock budgets across a typical small operation. Commercial agriculture profits directly from every dollar wasted this way, since waste means repeat purchases. Meanwhile, videos get watched, books get read, and Facebook groups get joined searching for real answers. Most advice found this way is either too vague to actually use or designed to sell something unnecessary. The real problem was never laziness or lack of skill, despite how it often feels in the moment. The simplest, most effective homestead hacks have been buried under decades of relentless product marketing instead. Earlier generations never owned a $300 automatic waterer or needed constant commercial feed deliveries. They ran simple, cheap, brilliant systems that made the land itself do most of the actual work. Those same systems still work today, often outperforming almost anything currently available for purchase. Nobody has been packaging them up clearly and handing them over until this exact breakdown right here. None of these hacks are genuinely new. Most predate anyone currently reading or watching by generations. They come from an era when farming wasn't a hobby choice, it was simply how survival worked. 18th century homesteaders never had the luxury of getting layout or feeding decisions wrong repeatedly. Wasted steps in a poor layout burned calories that simply could not be spared in that era. Animals not partially feeding themselves meant real hunger for the entire household right alongside them. Every decision had to be efficient, since no feed store existed down the road as a backup plan. Small inefficiencies like these rarely feel significant in the moment, yet they compound fast across a full year. Those farmers developed systems stacking multiple functions on top of each other within single structures. One structure often served 3 separate purposes, and one plant fed family, animals, and soil simultaneously. One daily chore loop handled everything in 30 minutes that modern homesteaders often spend 2 hours completing. Then industrial agriculture arrived, insisting that purchased feed, fertilizer, pesticide, and equipment replace all of it. Slowly, across roughly 75 years, all of that stacked knowledge quietly disappeared from everyday farming practice. It never disappeared because it stopped working. It disappeared because it stopped generating corporate profit. The hacks covered here come directly from that older tradition, each one tested on a real working property. Some came from old-timers in the local area. Others came from agricultural records dating back to the 1800s. Some got figured out the hard way, after years of overspending and overworking, without realizing better options existed. They all share one thing in common: replacing money and labor with design and biology instead. That is exactly how a homestead is genuinely supposed to run when set up correctly from the start. 15 hacks follow, and one specific hack alone could save more time than anything else on this entire list. First, place compost directly between the coop and the garden, rather than tucking it out of sight somewhere. This sounds almost insultingly basic, yet compost placement changes an entire property's daily workflow dramatically. Most people throw compost wherever space exists, behind a barn or down along a distant fence line. That means extra trips every single day, hauling scraps one direction and finished compost the opposite way. One straight line running co-op to compost a garden cuts 15 to 20 minutes off daily chores immediately. Across a full year, that adds up to over 100 hours reclaimed simply through smarter placement. Compost also breaks down faster when it gets fed consistently instead of sitting forgotten in a distant corner. Second, ferment chicken feed, one of the oldest tricks in the book that almost nobody actually uses. Regular dry feed goes into a bucket, gets covered with water, and sits for 3 full days. That fermentation process breaks down phytic acid, the compound that normally blocks proper nutrient absorption in feed. Chickens pull more protein, more minerals, and more energy from the exact same amount of feed afterward. Birds end up eating roughly 30% less by volume, since more of what they eat actually absorbs. On a 20-bird flock, that adjustment alone can save $15 to $20 every single month. That works out to close to $200 yearly from just 5 minutes of extra weekly effort. Firmer droppings, brighter yolks, and noticeably better feather condition tend to appear within roughly 2 weeks. All that's needed is a 5-gallon bucket, water, and a loosely fitted lid on top. No starter culture, and no fancy equipment required. Just time and biology doing what they've always done. Third, grow comfrey in every empty corner available anywhere across an entire property without exception. If only one plant could ever get chosen for a homestead, comfrey would be the obvious pick. This plant proves absurdly useful and remarkably difficult to actually kill once established properly. Comfrey functions as a dynamic accumulator, pulling minerals up from subsoil layers other plants simply cannot reach. Leaves get chopped 3 to 5 times yearly for use as mulch, animal feed, or compost activator. One mature comfrey plant produces up to 5 pounds of biomass with every single cutting taken. Planting 20 of them along fence lines and around fruit trees creates a free, self-renewing feed source. Chickens, goats, and rabbits all readily eat comfrey, while garden beds love it as a rich mulch layer. It costs essentially nothing after the very first planting, since comfrey spreads easily through simple root division. This single plant replaces commercial fertilizer, purchased mulch, and a real portion of any feed bill entirely. Fourth, rotate animals directly through garden beds during the off-season instead of keeping systems fully separate. A hack this cheap producing results this visible is exactly why it deserves wider attention than it gets. Most homesteaders keep animals in one area and gardens in another, running 2 completely separate worlds. Older generations ran these as one connected system instead, letting each piece support the other directly. After the last fall harvest, garden beds can open up entirely to chickens for supervised access. Chickens scratch through spent plants, eat pest larvae and weed seeds, and deposit high nitrogen manure exactly where needed. 4 to 6 weeks of chicken access on a 200 square foot bed replaces most soil amendments. Pest pressure the following spring drops dramatically since birds already ate most of the underlying problem. Timing matters here. Animals should come off beds at least 90 days before the next planting begins. That gap lets manure mellow properly, avoiding any risk of burning tender young transplants later on. Goats can clean up tough woody stalks that chickens tend to ignore during their own rotation through beds. Running goats first, and chicken second, clears, fertilizes, and pest-proofs beds within about 6 weeks total. Fifth, build garden beds running north to south rather than east to west across the property. This sounds simple and gets overlooked constantly, yet row orientation affects sunlight received across an entire season. North-south rows give every single plant equal sun exposure as the sun tracks east to west overhead. East-west rows create shading problems where taller plants block light from shorter plants growing behind them. That difference is genuinely measurable, with north-south orientation increasing yields by 10 to 15% typically. On a homestead garden, producing $1,200 worth of food yearly, that's real extra value gained. That works out to an extra $120 to $180 in production annually. None of that costs anything extra. no new materials, and no additional labor required whatsoever. Existing beds already in place can adjust by placing tallest crops on the north end specifically. That prevents those taller plants from shading everything else growing behind them throughout the season. Sixth, use a gravity-fed water system running from a single elevated tank across the property. Hauling water quietly kills more homestead time than almost any other single daily task performed regularly. One 275-gallon tote sitting on a 4-foot platform solves this problem entirely. That single tank can gravity feed water to a coop, garden drip lines, and a livestock trough simultaneously. No pump gets needed, no electricity gets used, and no daily hauling trips become necessary anymore. Filling the tank once weekly with a hose or collected rainwater lets gravity handle everything else automatically. Total setup cost runs around $80 to $150, depending on whether the tote is bought used. That investment pays for itself within the first month purely through time saved on daily water chores. Daily water chores dropping from 25 minutes to roughly 3 minutes adds up fast across a year. That represents over 130 hours reclaimed annually from one relatively simple gravity-based system. Half-inch polyline with T-splitters routes water to each station across the whole property easily. A ball valve at every endpoint allows individual zones to shut off independently as needed. The entire system installs within a single afternoon of focused effort on most small properties. Seventh, use the deep litter method inside a coop instead of scraping it clean every single week. Weekly coop scraping represents far more effort than necessary once this centuries-old alternative gets understood. Deep litter means adding fresh bedding directly on top of old bedding instead of removing it constantly. Over time, bottom layers begin composting right inside the coop itself, generating real biological activity. Beneficial microbes build up naturally, suppressing harmful bacteria and ammonia buildup within the coop environment. Coops smell noticeably better, birds stay healthier, and a full cleanout only happens once or twice yearly. Starting with 6 inches of pine shavings or straw sets the entire system up correctly from day one. Fresh layers get tossed on top every week or two, with occasional turning using a simple pitchfork. By spring, 8 to 12 inches of fully composted, garden-ready material can be pulled straight out. That represents $50 to $80 worth of finished compost that would otherwise require separate purchase entirely. Deep litter also generates gentle heat during decomposition, helping keep a flock warm through winter naturally. That functions as both a safety upgrade and genuine energy savings within one single simple decision. This one hack replaces weekly cleaning, commercial compost purchases, and winter heating costs all at once together. Eighth, plant a perennial food forest instead of continually expanding an annual vegetable garden every season. Annual gardens demand the exact same inputs every year: seeds, amendments, transplants, and consistent ongoing labor. A food forest works the opposite way, planted once and producing for decades with almost zero ongoing input. Fruit trees, berry bushes, perennial herbs, and nitrogen-fixing plants all layer together into one working system. Placement alone changing outcomes this much is a reminder that design often matters more than raw effort. That layered system essentially mimics how a natural forest already organizes itself without human intervention. After 2 to 3 years of establishment, a 500 square foot food forest produces real volume. 200 to 400 pounds of food yearly becomes achievable from that same modest footprint. The key lies in stacking layers deliberately, tall fruit trees on top and smaller bushes underneath them. Ground cover herbs and strawberries fill the bottom layer, while nitrogen fixers weave between everything else present. Annual maintenance drops down to basic pruning and harvesting, with no tilling or replanting required each year. A well-designed 10-tree food forest with berry understory can replace $500 to $800. That represents annual grocery spending offset once the whole system reaches full, established maturity over time. Ninth, design an entire property in zones based purely on how often each area actually gets visited. This functions as the master hack, the one making every other hack on this list work better. Zone design means placing things based on realistic interaction frequency rather than arbitrary or convenient placement. Whatever gets touched daily belongs closest to the back door, while weekly items sit further out from there. Anything mostly running itself belongs out at the actual edges of the property, farthest from daily traffic. Zone 1 covers a kitchen garden, herb bed, and chicken coop, all visited literally every single day. These should sit within 50 feet of the house for genuinely convenient, frictionless daily access. Zone 2 covers main garden beds, a compost station, and small livestock housing visited a few times weekly. Zone 3 covers an orchard, food forest, and pasture rotation areas, typically visited on a weekly basis. Zone 4 and beyond covers a woodlot, foraging areas, and any loosely managed wild space further out. Laying a property out this way shrinks a daily chore loop dramatically without adding any new work. One farmer applying this exact system cut daily chore time from 2.5 hours down sharply. That same farmer landed at roughly 45 minutes daily after redesigning based purely on visit frequency. No new purchases and no new equipment were needed, just a smarter arrangement of what already existed. 10th, use livestock guardian animals instead of expensive fencing upgrades most people assume are absolutely necessary. Before spending $2,000 on predator-proof fencing, a single guardian animal deserves serious consideration first. A guardian dog, a donkey, or even a llama integrated into a flock creates a living predator deterrent. That living deterrent adapts, patrols, and actively thinks, unlike a fence that simply sits there passively. A good livestock guardian dog costs $200 to $500 to acquire initially at the outset. Monthly feeding costs run around $30, a genuinely modest ongoing expense compared to fencing alternatives. Compare that to electric fencing running $3 to $5 per linear foot around a full perimeter. On even a half-acre enclosure, fencing costs more in the first year alone than 5 years of a dog. A single guardian animal thinking and adapting outperforms hardware that simply sits in one place forever. Donkeys prove even cheaper to maintain where pasture already exists, requiring almost zero additional training. They naturally act aggressively toward coyotes and foxes without needing any specialized guard training whatsoever. The real lesson here involves thinking in biological solutions rather than defaulting straight to hardware solutions. Living systems adapt to changing threats over time, while hardware simply breaks down and needs replacing eventually. 11th, collect and save seeds from a property's own plants every single growing season without exception. This ranks among the most overlooked money hacks available anywhere on a typical small homestead property. A single packet of heirloom seeds runs $3 to $5, yet one mature tomato produces enough seed. That single plant can produce enough seed for 50 to 100 plants the following growing season. Letting best performing plants go to seed at season's end, then drying and storing seed properly, works. Store seeds in a cool, dark place, and that specific variety never needs purchasing again going forward. Across 3 to 5 years of consistent saving, an entire garden seed budget drops close to zero. Each generation of saved seed also adapts slightly to specific local soil, climate, and growing conditions present. By year 5, plants become essentially custom-bred for that exact property's unique growing conditions. Starting with easy varieties makes sense. Tomatoes, peppers, beans, and lettuce all save reliably without much difficulty. Hybrids should get avoided in favor of heirloom, and open-pollinated varieties that consistently breed true. This single habit transforms an entire garden from a recurring annual expense into a self-sustaining system. 12th, sprout whole grains for fresh livestock feed available year-round, regardless of outside weather conditions. A pound of whole barley or wheat gets soaked overnight, then spread on a tray and rinsed twice daily. Within 5 to 7 days, a full tray of fresh sprouted fodder emerges weighing far more than the start. That tray typically weighs 4 to 6 times the original dry grain weight once fully sprouted through. 30 cents worth of grain effectively becomes nearly 2 pounds of living, enzyme-rich, highly digestible feed. Running 7 trays on a rolling system delivers fresh green feed daily, even through the depths of winter. Chickens go genuinely wild for it, goats love it, and rabbits thrive noticeably on this exact feed type. The nutritional profile runs significantly higher than dry grain, since sprouting unlocks otherwise dormant vitamins and amino acids. Feed cost per pound drops meaningfully, while animals simultaneously receive noticeably better overall nutrition from the same grain. Total setup cost runs around $20 for basic trays and a simple rack to hold them. 13th, run ducks instead of chemical treatments for slug and general pest control across garden beds. Slugs, snails, and ground-level insects destroying a garden find their natural answer in a small duck flock. 3 to 4 ducks patrol garden beds thoroughly, devouring slugs, snails, beetle larvae, and grubs efficiently. Unlike chickens, ducks avoid scratching up beds or damaging root systems while moving through garden rows. Seeds saved year after year quietly turn into a garden that fits one specific property better than any catalog variety. They waddle through, eat pests methodically, fertilize lightly as they go, and leave plants standing undamaged afterward. A pair of khaki Campbells or Indian runners clears a 500 square foot garden area within days. They keep that same area clean across an entire season, with zero chemical inputs required at any point. $30 to $60 gets saved yearly on organic pest control products through this single biological approach. Duck eggs also sell for $6 to $10 a dozen at most local farmers markets nearby. That effectively turns pest control into an active profit center rather than a pure ongoing expense. 14th, insulate coops with straw bales instead of relying on electric heat lamps through cold winter months. Heat lamps present real fire hazards, cost $8 to $15 monthly in electricity, and often prove unnecessary. Most cold, hardy chicken breeds don't actually need supplemental heat to survive winter comfortably at all. Stacking straw bales around a coop's outside walls in late fall provides genuine insulation value instead. That insulation holds warmth inside while blocking wind, all without any electrical cost or fire risk involved. Combined with the deep litter method covered earlier, composting bedding generates gentle warmth rising from below naturally. Straw bales hold that same warmth in place, keeping a coop 10 to 15 degrees warmer than outside. Total cost runs $20 to $40 for a handful of bales purchased locally each fall season. Come spring, those same bales break apart into garden mulch or additional compost material without any waste. No electricity, no fire risk, and no ongoing cost come attached to this particular winter solution. Birds also tend to come through winter healthier than they typically would under artificial heat lamp conditions. 15th and final, keep a homestead journal and track absolutely everything happening across the property consistently. This doesn't sound exciting on the surface, yet it ranks as the single highest return habit available. Writing down planting dates, harvest totals, animal production, spending, and failures builds real data over time. After 2 years of consistent tracking, a genuinely custom data set for one specific property emerges clearly. That data reveals which varieties outperform others, which months cost the most, and where time actually goes. It also reveals which animals genuinely turn a profit versus which ones merely break even overall. One homesteader discovered through careful journaling that quail eggs cost roughly $1.15 per dozen to produce. That same tracking revealed ducks producing eggs at just 40 cents per dozen under otherwise similar conditions. Without that tracking, nobody would have known which flock genuinely deserved expanding and which deserved scaling back instead. A $3 notebook paired with 5 minutes daily delivers more real decision-making power than most courses. Being completely honest, the very first attempt at homesteading involved doing almost everything the hard way possible. A co-op sat 300 feet from the back door, simply because chickens felt like they belonged out of the way. A compost pile sat behind a barn, rarely seen, and therefore rarely fed with any real consistency. Tracking numbers honestly tends to reveal surprises that pure intuition alone would never have caught. Garden beds ran east to west purely because a previous property owner had originally set them up that way. Every single morning began with 2.5 hours of chores before breakfast ever happened at all. Exhaustion set in quickly, overspending became normal, and doubt crept in about whether homesteading was even worth continuing. Then, an old-timer neighbor came by one afternoon and walked the entire property together in near silence. At one point he stopped, looked at the overall layout, and simply said everything sat in the wrong place. That single observation changed the entire trajectory of the project from that point forward completely. One full weekend went into moving compost onto the direct path between the coop and the garden. The chicken run got relocated closer to the house, cutting daily walking distance down significantly overall. A gravity-fed water tank went up on a simple platform, positioned near the back porch of the house. Feed fermentation replaced pouring dry pellets straight from the bag without any further processing beforehand. Within 30 days, daily chore time dropped from 2.5 hours down to about 50 minutes. The monthly feed bill dropped by nearly $35 purely from that single fermentation change alone. Garden beds started producing noticeably better once compost actually got used, instead of sitting forgotten and unused. Not a single new tool got purchased, and total spending on all these changes stayed under $100. The property simply stopped being fought against and started getting designed like an actual working system instead. That is really what these 15 hacks amount to. Design principles letting a homestead work with its owner. Every hack on this list works well individually, but stacking them together produces something genuinely powerful overall. A homestead stops being a scattered collection of separate projects and starts operating as one integrated system. Chickens feed the compost, compost feeds the garden, and garden scraps loop back around to feed the chickens. Ducks handle pest control automatically, a food forest produces without replanting, and water flows entirely by gravity. Feed grows on a simple windowsill tray without needing constant purchased bags delivered on any schedule. Within 1 to 2 years of applying even half these hacks, annual input costs typically drop noticeably. Most homesteaders see costs fall by 40 to 60%, while daily chore time gets cut roughly in half. Production actually increases during that same period, because biology handles the heavy lifting instead of pure effort. This is genuinely what self-sufficiency looks like in practice, not working harder, but working meaningfully smarter instead. That kind of compounding effect is exactly why stacking several hacks together beats trying just one alone. Systems that compound quietly over time consistently outperform brute effort applied without any real underlying structure. So here is a genuine question worth sitting with. Which of these 15 hacks would get tried first? Drop that answer in the comments below, since every single one gets read and genuinely considered afterward. If this video offered even one useful idea, hitting subscribe brings new homesteading breakdowns like this every week. Earlier generations never needed a catalog full of expensive equipment to run a genuinely productive homestead property. They had knowledge, design, and working systems, and that same exact toolkit is now fully available again. Start simple, stack these ideas smart, and let the property itself handle far more of the actual work.